Namaste and Shalom.
Namaste and Shalom.
Yeah. I have a very special guest. Stephen Siegel is a Jewish person who has followed the Hindu path for many decades and lives in Baltimore. I met him at the Himalayan Institute retreat over New Year's Day, New Year's weekend, which is an institution founded by Swami Rama and now run by Pandit Trigunite. And he was one of the 200 participants there. And we got to know each other. And I was very intrigued by his background, where he's so well informed about Hinduism, about Tantra, about Sri Vidya, about Advaita. He's been to India. He's had many gurus. So, and now he's created a hybrid where he's teaching Hindu ideas to Jewish people and the organization is called Prayag.
Mm-hmm. Prayag.
A center for meditation or Kabbalistic.
Yeah, it's both Kabbalistic and traditional Himalayan.
Okay.
And I'm teaching not so much Hindu tradition to Jews, but meditation tradition from both sources to whoever is interested.
Right. Okay, but one of the things that struck me was when you said that you've been in this journey for a long time with various Hindu gurus and very fascinated by the different teachings.
Yes.
And then you wanted to find out if similar things are also available in Judaism. And you found that similar things are available in Judaism. So you wanted to revive those.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a very fascinating journey.
It's been a very interesting journey.
And how did you first meet your first guru, which was Ramdas?
I studied one weekend with Ramdas. He's not. I didn't study enough with him to call him my guru. But
how old were
my
you?
first teacher.
How old were you then?
I was in college.
So this was 1970s?
Late 60s.
Late 60s. That was the classical era of the 60s.
Yes.
And Ramdas was in full swing.
Yes, and he came to American University in Washington for a weekend, and I went. But then I just kind of read, books on Tibetan Buddhism from Dr. Evans Wentz. Wrote a lot of books, translated a number of them. Just studied various things until 1974, I guess it was. The Baltimore India Forum had a conference where they invited yoga teachers, meditation teachers to come give a 5-minute presentation, and I went. And I was the only one that attracted me was from the Himalayan Institute.
Swami Ram.
Well, it wasn't him, but
Okay.
it was just a local
speaker.
yoga teacher who happened to be in that lineage. So that's what attracted me. So I started taking yoga lessons with her, and less than a year later, she said, "I'm going out to Western Pennsylvania for a retreat with Swami Rama. You have to come." And I went, and I met him.
And that is this place where we are?
No, Western Pennsylvania.
Western, some other place.
Near Pittsburgh.
Okay.
It was up in a camp or something.
That center is still there?
The Pittsburgh Center is. This was just a location they
Okay.
had. They just rented a space to have a camp. Anyway, so I met him. He told me to make an appointment with his secretary. I made an appointment, and the next thing I knew, I was initiated, which I've later learned was unusual, that he wouldn't do that usually the first time you meet. And studied with him for about 4 years.
When you say study, how seriously?
Well, at that time, the closest he would come to where I was living was Pittsburgh. So every time he or one of his teachers was doing something in Pittsburgh, I would go. Not just the local teachers, but if he brought someone in. So
And the study meant listening and practice, some practice?
Listen, practice. There was one teacher came in and taught the Yoga Sutras. Swami Rama came and taught many things. And it was a very intimate situation, because it's a mansion. It's not a huge institution. So everybody kind of slept there, and
so did you
we
read some of
cooked
his
for
books?
him.
Or you lived together, kind of?
Well, yeah, more or less. And,
Yeah.
And for short periods of time, for a week here, a week there. And then when they bought this location in eastern Pennsylvania, it was closer, and I would come very often.
How often?
Maybe not quite once a month, but at least once every
For
month.
many years?
For 4 years, yeah.
4 years. So what all of Swami Rama have you read? I mean, you're a prolific. Every time I see you in the coffee shop, you're reading one of these Tantra books or...
I think I've read just about everything that he published.
That must be what, 10, 15 books?
Yeah, I mean, my bookshelf, it's wide.
So
yes.
you're extremely well read.
In Swami Rama, yes.
In Swami Rama. and the practices were what? What were the practices? Were they standard meditation? Were they tantra? What were they?
In the early days, it was pretty much standard meditation, mantra meditation. And,
so he gave you a mantra?
Yes.
That was your initiation?
Yeah.
Shaktipat. So you had Shaktipat from him?
Yeah. Okay.
So that's very good. You're very, one of the few, I mean, in that era there were quite a few.
Yes.
But you're loyal to Swami Rama because you come here.
And actually, and then he called the first International Yoga Congress in Chicago. I can't remember what year it was, but a couple of years after that.
In the 70s?
Yeah.
In the 70s.
Mid to late 70s.
So you're a very good time capsule of the history of the whole movement in the West.
Yeah, I mean, he had, Ravi Shankar was there, Swami Satchidananda was there. It was remarkable.
Yeah.
And in fact, one of the panels was a rabbi and a priest and a minister talking about where this fits in the West.
Right.
And it turns out that one of the people on that panel later on became my teacher for the Jewish side of it.
Right. And did you meet the Benedictine monk who brought transcendental meditation, Thomas Keating?
No.
No, because that was another.
I know his work, but
you know his work.
I didn't meet it.
There was there was Swami Rama oriented surrounding his work movement.
Right.
There were other gurus, so there would be Osho related groups of events, and Maharishi Mahesh Yogi kind of events, and Prabhupada, who started ISKCON, his events. So there were, I would say, 6, 7 primordial or pioneering teachers.
Yes.
Each of them started huge movements, and they would have conferences. They would have thousands of Western students, many locations, and so you were part of the Swami Rama part of that.
Right. Yeah.
That's interesting. So this went on. So your close relationship and practice. So when you say you became a follower practitioner, did you practice every day?
Yes. In fact, early on, Swami Rama had said to me, if you meditate at 4 o'clock, I will be with you, wherever you are.
Okay.
So I started practicing 4 o'clock in the morning. And I haven't strictly done it continuously for all these years, but for most of the years I've done it, and I'm doing it now. A few breaks here and there. And he's with me still. So that's some of my best times.
So you consider Swami Ram to be a guru?
Yes.
You do good. And so when he was in the body, you did all the things one would do to the guru. Touch his feet?
No.
You didn't touch his feet.
In the West, he discouraged that a lot.
He discouraged that.
I mean, a lot of the Indians that came to him would do that, but he didn't want it.
Okay. So that shift from the tradition was he started it. It's not that the Western students didn't want to follow. He felt a little awkward with Western students.
He wanted. I mean, he called the place the Himalayan Institute of Yoga Science and Philosophy, and he approached it that way. I mean, they had a scientific lab up here for a number of years where they were doing research on breathing. It was a very philosophical and scientific approach, and he discouraged all the trappings of the guru.
Trappings of the guru. So I want to come back. So till you started in the mid-70s with Swami Rama. Till when?
Till 79, 80, around then.
Okay, and then what happened?
I was in the habit of, after my morning meditation, when the sun would come up, taking a walk up the hill. And Swami Rama also had a similar habit. He would take walks after sunrise. And one morning he said to me that you should go take a look at your roots. I think you'll make more progress if you examine your roots. And at that point I was so far from my Jewish roots that I didn't really register what he's talking about. I said, all right, Guru told me to do this, I have to do it, but I have to figure out what it is. And it finally sunk in that might be what he was talking about. So I went and started studying Kabbala and studying some of my Jewish roots, and realized that someone who I met at his International Yoga Congress is a teacher that I wanted to study with, who happened to be in Philadelphia at the time. So I started studying with Rabbi Zalman Shalom, who was kind of he created, or one of the creators of the Jewish renewal movement, kind of a neo-Hasidic. It was kind of bringing all of this, the ideas similar to the ideas I'd been studying here that are found in Judaism, and kind of uncovering them. But he wrote a lot of books also. He was a very, very good teacher.
Okay. What was his relationship with the Eastern stuff, the Hindu Buddhist thought? Had he gone to India? Did he have teachers?
I don't know if he's ever had specific Indian teachers, but he also was a Sufi.
Okay.
He was fluent in Arabic, and in fact, one time on a trip to Israel, he went out and sought out some Sufis and said, I want to do zikr with you. And they said, well, this Jewish rabbi wants to, they didn't believe it, so they started asking him questions, and sure enough, his beliefs were so meshed with theirs that they were willing to practice with him.
So in his biography, if you were to have, I hope there's such a thing, but in his biography, what was his story in terms of being born Jewish and wanting to at the end create a Jewish renewal movement using Sufism, Hinduism, and so on, bringing it all together into Judaism. So what was his story like? Who all influenced him? How Jewish was he? Was he alienated?
He was born in Europe, one of the Hasidic sects.
Okay.
So he was very, very, very traditional, and met the Chabad rabbi, the Lubavitcher rabbi before the last one. I've forgotten his name now, and studied with him. And in fact, he was studying together with the one who later became the Lubavitcher rabbi. And he was appointed, he and several others, to go out and bring this, Orthodox Hasidic Judaism to the college campuses, to teach students, to bring them back.
Which year was he trying to bring them back?
I don't know.
Okay.
It was early, probably the 60s, my guess, but I don't know for sure.
Okay.
And basically along the way he used to say it is, while he was teaching them, they were teaching him, and he was learning what they needed, what would draw them in, what it was that would work for them. And he realized that they really wanted the spiritual side, not just the learning. So he started developing that.
So this is a very common story I hear from Catholics, Protestants.
Same thing.
That there was that the move to the East in the 60s meant that the Orthodoxy felt that there was some gap, some lack, some deficiency which they were not able to supply, and the Easterners were able to supply some experiential stuff because the Judeo-Christianity had become very heady, very intellectual, book oriented. Mainstream is still like that.
Yep.
So these pioneering Jewish teachers, Catholic teachers, Protestant teachers decided to go to campuses where the whole New Age movement was going wild, and in order to understand what do these people want, why are so many American kids, white Americans, going to Hindu gurus, what is lacking in our tradition that we should offer. And so it seems that this person, Zalman Schachter, Schachter, was a pioneer in that process.
Yes, absolutely.
Of bringing, so his origin was Hasidic Jew, which is very, very orthodox.
Yes.
And the more orthodox, the more it was considered obsolete, or not, people in the mainstream in the 60s not interested in the 60s. So by going to the students, learning why they are excited, he could at least formulate the needs.
Yeah, and he created a movement that, his own practice was still strictly Orthodox. The only exception he made was having men and women together instead of separate. In the Orthodox, they're all separate. But other than that, his practice was still the very traditional Orthodox. But he would bring in, for example, the heart of Jewish prayer is what's called the Amida, the silent prayer. Well, the silent prayer before it was written down as here's the words you have to say silently was a meditation. I mean, this stuff that's written down was some rabbis from the year 200 or so saying, well, this is what we'll put in here so that people don't forget what to do. But it was really a meditation, so he encouraged people to meditate during that time.
So that meditation means he introduced words into it. It was silent, but with words.
Well, that was what was introduced years ago.
Okay.
Then the words became more important than the meditation.
Right.
So that he was taking us back, the renewal, go back to the meditation, where the words are a guideline, they're not something you're supposed to just read. So that was one of the ideas that he brought in. A lot of very creative ideas. He also brought in a lot of philosophical and psychological types of things. For example, he would encourage people to go off and do dyads and share. In fact, I met my wife at one of his retreats, and our first interaction was sitting for 10, 15 minutes out in the field, asking each other, what is it that keeps you from being who you really are? And then just using, top of the mind, replying to that. So we joked that we had never met, or we had never dated, but we knew each other better than most people who had dated for years after this one retreat.
So basically, he was an innovator,
Yes.
out of the box, Jewish person, teacher, bringing in things from various traditions in order to revive Judaism. And that's the new that's called the new revival,
Jewish renewal.
Renewal movement.
And he, I guess he was bringing some things in from other traditions, but rather than that, he was looking at other traditions, seeing what they had, and then finding the same thing in the Jewish tradition to bring it out and renew it, rather than bring something else in. A lot of the Jewish meditation teachers nowadays are bringing in Vipassana, bringing in different types of meditation. But he was not doing that. He was saying, okay, this is what works there. We must have something like that, or else we wouldn't have lasted this long.
So what you're saying is, he was at the stage where he wanted to bring in those Eastern traditions where he felt they must have existed already in Judaism.
And he'd find them. Rather than bringing in from outside, he'd say, okay, here's what's the equivalent that was here that people forgot about.
So later on, other Jewish teachers started bringing things that were not necessarily in Judaism but could be added.
Yes, and that's what's happening a lot now. But it's also there's also a lot of very authentic traditional Jewish meditation being taught.
So what are some of those things that you feel that others are bringing in that are new? Vipassana,
this mindfulness. Although, again, there are comparable or equivalent things in the Jewish tradition. They're just not as obvious. But it's easier to take something that's already there and well formed and use it.
What else would you say? Vipassana is one. TM.
No, some mantra though. Yeah, a little bit of mantra meditation using Hebrew phrases for the mantras.
Right.
And in fact, there's a whole movement. In fact, my wife is involved in of Jewish chanting now, using phrases from the liturgy to chant instead of just reading.
What about goddess? That's a big one.
Actually, that's a very interesting one.
Because I keep hearing that Jews say, well, there's a dichotomy between the Jew rabbis I talk to. Those who say it's something new, you're not allowed. Some is masculine religion. Some say it's neutral. Some say it was already there. Some say it can be added, so we're happy to add the Hindu goddess. Some saying that it was already there in the Kabbala, it was already there. And some saying, no, that's fraud because this Kabbala is not as old. So tell me what your thought of this. I mean, within the Jewish circle,
there's a lot of different opinions.
Many different opinions on bringing in the Hindu goddess into Judaism, from the side that says it was already there, we lost it, we Hindus are, thank you Hindus, you're bringing us back, to those who are saying, well, it wasn't there, but it's compatible with the goddess, there's nothing preventing us. It wasn't there, but we can always add, we're progressive, smart people. To those who are saying, well, it wasn't meant to be there, and so on. Where do you stand?
I stand with it's always been there.
Okay.
It just was very well hidden.
Why was it hidden?
I think it was probably hidden early on, because all around them were idolatry things, where they were making sacrifices to female goddesses. There were, to male gods, and I think early on they wanted to distinguish themselves and say, no, there's only the one, not a multitude. And the only way they could come up with one was to have either man or woman. They didn't come up with the concept. They couldn't hold on to the concept of the common people. Whereas I think the intellectuals and the mystics all along from the very beginning held the concept of two in one. And in fact, in Kabbalah, there's a very strong tradition talking about Shekhinah, which is the imminent present aspect of God, which is also considered the feminine, as opposed to the way out there, the other.
But in the Holy Spirit in Christianity, I know I'm switching.
Yeah.
Holy Spirit is masculine.
Yes.
Not feminine.
And the Holy Spirit is
masculine.
Yeah, but Holy Spirit is the one. Isn't that the one that's out?
Yeah, but in the Trinity,
Mm-hmm.
the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, or Holy Spirit.
Uh-huh.
Catholics often like to say the Holy Spirit is Shakti and saying it's Goddess.
Okay.
That's their
That's
pathway.
interesting.
That's their pathway to seek
Uh-huh.
in the whole Goddess tradition and say it's already there.
Mm-hmm.
But then the Orthodox Jesuits will tell you that the Holy Spirit is masculine. So you cannot, because it's always referred to as He,
Mm-hmm.
and He enters from outside. God's grace He brings in the Holy Spirit.
Right, which
It's
is
not
the difference.
Which is not something innate.
Mm-hmm.
So in Judaism, is it innate?
Yes, in fact, again, it depends on what branch of Judaism we're talking about. If
Okay.
we're talking about the mystics or the Kabbalists in Judaism, there's this concept of one has to do something, has to raise up energy, which is very similar to some of the practices in Tantra, and that then draws down. So what's raising up, what's here is the feminine, and what's drawing down is the masculine.
Right.
And that's very that's classic in Kabbalah, and in fact, one of the things that struck me when I was studying this was reading some of the Psalms, and it almost seems like it's describing exactly that process.
So we'll come back. I want to come back to the metaphysics, but I want to also go to your journey. So we're interweaving as something very interesting milestone happens. I want to pause and talk philosophy, then go back to the
Sure.
rewind. I mean, this is very fascinating for me. So we are in the around 1980s time frame now that you've discovered a Jewish teacher
Right.
who is interested in the revival of Judaism,
Mm-hmm.
who's going to college campuses and studying this New Age movement, wanting to understand how Judaism can supply it.
Mm-hmm.
Similar movements started by Catholics and Protestants also.
And in parallel to that, it was also starting another movement called the Havarah movement, where instead of going to the big synagogue or the temple, people would just meet together in their homes, smaller groups.
What was it? How do you spell it?
That's from Hebrew, so it's very different ways.
If I were to do a search,
I were going to spell it. I'd spell it Havurah.
Havurah.
But it could also be spelled with the CH.
Okay.
Havarah instead of Havarah.
Or Chavurah movement.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And in fact, Reb Zalman came down to Baltimore 2 summers in a row to help us start a Havarah in Baltimore.
So
the retreats.
So this is not synagogues, but small sanghas.
Just meeting each other's homes. Havarah is a variation of the word for haver, friend. So it's a Havarah is a group of friends meeting together for spiritual purposes. So it's a satsang. Yeah.
Okay.
Or
like prayer meetings. So one of the outcomes of the 60s, the reaction, the response from the Judeo-Christian was starting the satsangs, Christian satsangs, Jewish satsangs.
Yeah.
Now, did Jews, in order to rescue their children back, like the Christians, started something called deprogramming movements? You heard about the word deprogramming.
I've heard of it.
Deprogramming was they would go to those who run away to Osho or who run away to ISKCON. Rich parents would hire a deprogrammer, pay him a lot of money and say, now you go get my son back or you go get my daughter back and give you this much money. And they'll go catch them somehow and remove the brain, what they consider was brainwashing. They felt that the gurus had brainwashed them and wanted to bring them back. Did Jews start that also?
I'm not aware of it.
Okay.
They did have folks that would try to, in an organized way, teach them. But I don't think that, you know, the not Kabbalah, but, you know, here's Judaism, here's not what you weren't learning, and why you went there.
So
but not as far as I know, trying to deprogram per se.
So did any Jewish people think that you've been brainwashed? What was during the 70s when you were doing all this?
Mm-hmm.
What was the reaction of parents, friends, family, rabbis that you've gone and done all this?
Curious, but not a sense of being brainwashed. I mean, I guess my family probably thought it was a little strange coming up to the Himalayan Institute all the time. But even during then, I would still, you know, be with the family for holidays and you know, do the various rituals for the various holidays. So they were happy as long as that was going on.
And you were sort of not in the face Hindu. With them.
Right, no.
You were just sort of doing this your own thing. They knew you were going to this guru or that guru, and maybe you had some symbols, maybe you turned vegetarian. Did you turn vegetarian?
I was a vegetarian for about 7 or 8 years, yeah.
So they found some quirks or what they consider to be strange things.
Right, but again, not the outer trappings, not the symbolism, because that was not what Swami Rama was teaching in those days.
Right.
He was teaching it. This is a science of, you know, of how to grow.
Right.
You know?
Right. Okay. So now in the 80s, when you had this Jewish teacher in the revival movement, what happened to your relationship with Swami Rama? Did you back off or have it parallel?
I stopped coming here. I still kept maintain my meditation practice, so I had my relationship with Swami Rama at 4 o'clock in the morning, but not a face-to-face thing. Although I came probably once or twice every couple of years or so, when there was something particular that I wanted to come to. And shortly after that was when he left the country and went to India. So I know it was no longer a strong attraction for me to come here. And I guess a little later, I got interested. I'm trying to think what it was. I came to one seminar here about the Cave of the Heart meditation, at which Panditji and Swami Veda were both co-leading.
When was that?
I can't even, I'd have to go back and look at it. I've got a CV that I wrote about, my spiritual CV. I'd have to go back and look at it. I don't remember.
I would love to see your spiritual CV. Would you send it to me?
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
It's very fascinating. You have a good story. Yeah.
So I came to that, and it just felt very much like home. So at that point, I started looking for what Swami Veda was doing, and I started going every year, every other year.
So basically, just so people can understand this, you had an intense thing with Swami Rama for a long time. You met the Jewish rabbi who's doing the Jewish renewal, so you kind of less into Swami Rama, except meditation, you're not in touch with him. You go with the Jewish rabbi, you do that. But then there's an event in this organization, in the Himalayan Institute, where you meet another Swami called Swami Veda.
Right, it was one of Swami Rama's disciples.
So then what happens?
I started going. He had a center in Minneapolis. I started going out there once a year in the summer. He would have silent retreats, 5 or 10 days. So I started going to those, and got into silence and really enjoying that. And then they also would have sometimes a week-long teaching around that, around Guru Purnima. So I started getting back into it a bit with him at that point. But again, not as often as I had been coming here, but once or twice a year. And he encouraged me to, a number of years, well, much later, 2010, he encouraged me to come to India for a 40-day silence retreat on my own. And just come to the ashram and do my own silence. So I did that.
In Rishikesh?
Yeah.
Okay. So,
But in the meantime, our Havara is very active. I'm still very active in it. I'm kind of, people look to me as one of the movers and shakers. In fact, I get mail every now and then addressed to Rabbi for the East Bank Havara, which
Havara means satsang. That's it. The satsang.
Basically, yeah. But we meet every week.
So this has been your summary of your experiences with the Hindu gurus. Now let's talk about your own. You became the leader of a satsang at some point. You run the Prayag center. So what is the story of that? When did you? Because you went. One could say you went Hindu with Swami Ram, then the Jewish with the revival movement, then back to Hindu with the Swami Veda. So you are going and learning and bringing things back and forth, and you are rediscovering the Jewish traditions by going closely studying the Hindu tradition, saying, okay, now I learned this thing about the goddess. Let me see where it is found. That sort of a thing. Well, so you're really an archaeologist.
Yes.
You are an archaeologist.
Yes.
You are an archaeologist in the sense that. So I'm writing this word. I'm just saying Jewish. I'm going to write this word, and I'm going to coin this word. That you're a Jewish archaeologist. Can we come up with a word we both like, which is, like the physical archaeologist looks at physical stuff and he says, this thing about 2,000 years old was such and such. There is an intellectual archaeologist who says, this knowledge, I think if you connect the dots a certain way, maybe these guys haven't connected it for a long time. I'm going to show you how to connect these dots because I found something which fits into these dots. So this is the beginning of a sentence, this is the end of a sentence or a paragraph. The middle has been lost and I'm going to find it. And I found this in. So the Hindu repository is an archaeological repository where Jewish elements can be found. So this is another kind of interesting relationship. Do you have a term for that? What would be a Jewish archaeologist using Hindu material?
I don't have a term for that. I have a good, interesting story though.
Okay, tell me.
So, for years, Swami Veda was saying, start a center in Baltimore. Start a center in Baltimore. Enough of this learning. Teach. In fact, when I took the yoga training course, the teacher's training.
Which year was that? Is there a year for that? Because that would be a milestone.
2007 or 8. So I don't know exactly.
So about a decade ago.
Yeah, about that. So it was sitting. So Swami Veda was sitting there, and one of his primary teachers was giving out certificates when you complete this. So the assistant calls my name, and I go up, and Swami Veda, instead of giving a nice little blessing, he says, "And you should be up here doing this. You should already be teaching. You shouldn't be just learning how to teach. You know all you need to know. He was giving me a hard time, and he was constantly telling me, "You've got to be teaching. You can't just take all the stuff in. You've got to teach it." So eventually, he finally convinced me. And when I got back from in fact, when I did my 40 days of silence, for 3 days after that, 2 other folks and I hired a car and drove, and a driver, and went from Rishikesh up toward the Himalayas for a one-day trip. And on the way up, we went as far as Chadrabandi, and went there and did some puja. And then on the way back, stopped at Prayag. And I got down to the water at Prayag at the point, where this remarkable, mountains, flowing, bright aqua glacier melts comes from one side, and the big, slow-moving, not really slow-moving, but the big, wide, sort of brownish look comes from, and they meet at this point. And I got to that point, and I said, this is where I live my life. Where all this exciting stuff from the east and this big, very ancient thing from the west are coming together. So that's where I got the name for my group in Prayag.
So Prayag, for you, is the...
it's a confluence of the 2 holy streams.
One is this fast, exciting, new Eastern stuff coming into the West.
Right.
And this calm, very old, relaxed, big, huge thing is the Jewish tradition.
Yeah.
And
together
the
they
Jewish
get very
tradition is absorbing, assimilating the Eastern tradition, or some
no,
elements.
actually, it's creating something new.
Something
Because from that point on, they no longer have 2 different names. The name is now the Gancha.
So if that is true, then you would not be teaching to your people to be better Jews. It would not be a Jewish renewal.
That's right.
It would be a Siegelism. It would be, I'm bringing you something new, Stephen Siegelism. I'm inventing the Stephen Siegel religion, which borrows from the stream, the big religion called Judaism, and another very exciting stream from Hinduism, and joining the two, I'm creating Siegelism. Is that what you're doing, or
No.
are you saying that I'm bringing Judaism back to its original glory, using this stream to revive it, because this stream has got some excitement, and this big huge river of Judaism used to have it, but it lost its way 100 miles back, somewhere they built a dam or something, they lost all that exciting stuff. And it's depleted, it's become very slow and calm and gentle, and it's not exciting. So I'm bringing the excitement back, but actually I'm reviving what was already there. Which of the two how do you present it to your students?
Okay, what I presented is neither of those.
Okay.
Because I don't teach either religion.
Okay.
I teach technology.
Okay.
Techniques, how one works with oneself. In fact, for example, I spent a lot of time in my last 2 years teaching yamas and niyamas.
Right.
And at first students were kind of balking at that. It's like, when are we going to get into the the other good stuff? I said, this is the foundation. If you get this really good, everything else will just flow. Then I got trained in the Jewish tradition, something called Musar. And Musar is yamas and niyamas technique. It's the techniques to improve and change. And it's a technology. So I've taught that and led groups with that. But I'm not teaching either the Hindu or the Jewish. I'm teaching, here's a technique. This happens to come from this tradition. This happens to come from that tradition. And if you use both of those, it'll make that progress in that area of your life even faster and stronger.
Right.
Likewise, so this interesting story. So I've been doing this practice from Swami Rama for many years.
Right.
And this is, we're talking maybe 20 years ago, 15 years ago at most. 15 years probably, 15 or 18 years. And one morning, I could not maintain my concentration. And because it's a fairly involved, long practice, a lot of mantras, and my mind just wouldn't do it. And I was like, what is this all of a sudden? For since the 70s, I've been doing this fairly regularly and have never had a problem. It's like if I didn't do it, it was because I didn't bother.
Right.
So I decided to just try just simple mindfulness, just to see what's going on in my head.
Right.
And what I found was snatches of the 23rd Psalm. Not the whole thing or anything, just little bits and pieces here and there. It's like, I recognize this from somewhere. It's the 23rd Psalm. So I then spent probably close to a year learning and researching the 23rd Psalm and applying what I had learned in Kabbalah to that. So in Kabbalah, there's a tradition, whenever you read a text, you have to read it at 4 different levels. There's the surface level, just the story of the words. Then there's something that in Hebrew is called remez, hints. There are hints in the story of something else going on under the surface. And then there's another one called drash, which is story, but it's a story underneath the story. And then the fourth one is called sod, which is translated as secret or hidden. But one of my other teachers, who I've studied with not for a long time, but took a few courses with, who was a Kabbalist, well-known Kabbalist from Israel, said, no, you don't read that as secret. Read it as taste. He says, because it's not like you're not allowed or hiding it. It's that it's like chocolate. You can't describe it to someone, they have to experience it. So that fourth level is the experiential level of what's going on in the story. So I applied that, and I started finding things very interesting in the 23rd Psalm that it takes up too much background to get into detail, but very much like chakras in the Eastern tradition, there's this tree of life in the Kabbalistic tradition that also can be overlaid onto the body. And it turns out that either these sphera, that they're called, centers of the Kabbalah, line up with chakras, or a balance point between 2 different of these sphera line up with the chakra. So what I thought I discovered was that the 23rd Psalm was giving you as a guided meditation, moving energy up the chakras and then welcoming energy back down. And I showed this work to this well-known Kabbalist teacher from
This is the
Israel.
23rd Psalm from the Bible.
Yes, from the Bible. So I showed this to this rabbi, this actually Rosh Yeshiva, the head of a Kabbalistic yeshiva from Israel. And I said, somebody, all these years those songs have been around, somebody else must have seen something like this in there. I can't be the first one to see this. And he looked at it and he says, I've never read anything like that, but it looks good. It makes sense. Keep working on it. So that's kind of inspired me and encouraged me to say, okay, so there's a lot of this stuff in there that nobody was looking for. That's why they didn't find it. It's not that it's hidden. It's just that they weren't trying. You know, so my experience was that after spending a fair amount of time here studying, you know, traditions and Tantra and all the terminology, when I went back and read Kabbalah, it suddenly made sense.
You seem to be, from my insight or my guess is that you seem to be somebody who is diving into the tradition of Tantra and then going back and rediscovering, finding new things in the Kabbalah every single time.
Yes.
And so you may have had 20 iterations in your life. I mean, you are on the 21st iteration. Each time you go back to the Kabbalah with a new, you dive into the Tantra, you take more things with you that you can look for. It tells you where to look, what to look for, and then you find these things.
Yeah. Yes, it's remarkable. When I was taking the first course in Living Tantra here, 98, 99, I can't remember exactly when it was. I happened to also at the same time be reading a book by a Hasidic rabbi from I think he died in the 40s. In fact, I know he did. He died in the Warsaw Ghetto. And I was reading this and it's like, wait, he's describing exactly what we're learning, just using different terminology. It was just remarkable. In fact, I showed it to someone. One of my friends who had studied with me here. I can't remember his name either, but he was from Washington, D.C. and was also a Sanskrit scholar and very, very knowledgeable. And I showed him this. I said, you've got to read this paragraph. And he read it and he said, that is the clearest explanation of that particular aspect of Tantra I've ever seen. Who wrote this? He said, Rabbi Shapira? And it's there. It's just, it's just most people don't know about it.
Right. So, is there a for a historian, kind of like I fit into that role, history of religious interactions and whatnot. Is there a summary that you have done or could do of Hindu Tantra, Shakti, Path, these kind of the goddess tradition, which is what this is, and the equivalent in Judaism that you feel ought to be acknowledged, but most mainstream Jews would not acknowledge. Because when they talk about, this is what fits into my Hindu-Jewish thing also. When average Jew talks about why we and Hindus may have things in common, there's things like family values, and truth is one, and we all love peace, and it's very superficial things. And you're drilling deeper than that, and you're finding many things. And each time you take a dive into the Tantra tradition, you take some interesting things that you feel intuitively probably belong in Judaism, and you go look for places where it belongs. So, if somebody said, what are such things that people ought to know about? Is there a list like that? Like, for instance, this 23rd Psalm in the Bible, you feel is kind of a guided meditation to raise Kundalini, that sort of thing.
Basically, yeah. Well, on one level, yes.
One level.
Because like I said, there's 4 levels.
Yes.
So on one level, it's clearly just the psalm.
So in that same way, is there a kind of a glossary of such ideas that you think it would be an interesting?
It's a very interesting idea.
It's the sort of thing I do. I love to do this sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that it exists per se anyway, but different Kabbalists at different times have looked at different texts and seen interesting things.
One Jewish guy who was into ISKCON for a long time moved back to into Judaism and wrote something similar about the principal ideas of Vaishnavism he could find in Judaism.
Mm-hmm.
That was his journey.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if there's a way to organize all these. Because once you've organized them, then you can you are in between the tradition, the Hindu tradition on the one side, but also with the real confrontation comes with the mainstream Judaism tradition.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that is really what you're up against because they don't buy any of this.
Well, but then when I lead meditations at a synagogue occasionally, and what I do is find them, the specific things that are in the Jewish tradition. For example, it's very interesting in the Old Testament, in the Torah, there are like 13 chapters, a huge section of it is describing the design and construction of the Mishkan, the temporary moving tabernacle when they were traveling in the desert. You stop and think about it, 2 chapters about the Ten Commandments, the whole Sinai experience, 2 chapters. The whole rest of the Torah, there's nothing else that uses that much type, except for this construction of this temporary temple. Because its purpose is, originally only until they get to the Holy Land when they'll build a temple. So the question for the Kabbalists is, why? Why would the Bible do this? There's got to be something more there. Well, it's a lot like a Sri Yantra. It's telling you the structure of the universe and how to get to that Holy of Holies.
Okay, so let me write down. So the first was the 23rd. What is this one called? 13 chapters?
I don't know exactly where. It's in Exodus, and it's all about the construction, the design and construction of the tabernacle, the temporary tabernacle that they would travel with them. It was collapsible. They would fold it, close it up, carry it with them to the next place. First thing to do when they set up camp is set up this tabernacle, the place where God dwells. Okay. But its intention was to only last until they got to the Holy Land.
So you think this is Sri Chakra?
Not that it's necessarily the Sri Chakra, but it's very similar concept. It's a way to go from the outer. If you think about, they set up a wall, and outside of that wall is all of the stuff, all the busyness of the world. You go inside that wall, and suddenly you're in a different space. And then within that, there's a place for the sacrifices. There's a place for washing water, and then you go into inside of another. Actually, not really a wall. It's cloth, several layers of cloth, like a tent, and it's even quieter. And only the priests go into this inner area, and in there are certain symbols. There's light. There's a table with incense. There's a table with some bread, some offerings, and then inside of that is yet another enclosed space that is so holy that only the high priest goes there once a year. No one goes in there. And in fact, when he goes in there, they tie a string around his foot, so in case it's overwhelming, they can pull him back out again, because they can't go in and get him. Okay, so what is this whole thing? It's describing physical body, going to mental. It's the 5 sheaths, going from physical body to mental, or to prana, to energy, excitement and energy, and all of that, the sacrifices and stuff, into the next level, which is the mind and emotions, into the next level, which is the blissful level, and eventually the Holy of Holies, the self. Well, that's the same process as Sri Yantra. You're going in to the center. So it's not a Sri Yantra, but it serves the same purpose.
Right.
So I have a meditation that I do, where you just sit down and you start with the outside world, and you gradually let go of the various things that are distracting you, so you can go to the next level, and let go of the things that are there that are distracting to go to the next level. And it's very Jewish, because it's tied directly into something from Torah, and yet it's very similar to what we could do here. It didn't come from here, but having experienced what I experienced here, I could see it, whereas otherwise I wouldn't have never seen it.
Right. So, so clearly, you are an important gateway for Tantra ideas into Jewish revival, in a sense. Are there 5 other people like you or 500 other people like you who are doing this sort of thing? Because there must be quite a few.
There are quite a few. Probably not 500, but probably maybe 50 or 100.
And where do
And
they meet?
many of them are much more trained than I am. The rabbis, they've studied the Jewish side of it on a much deeper level. I mean,
Who are some of the leaders in this area of particularly Tantra or Indian techniques, philosophical, scientific techniques, reviving Judaism? Who are some of the leaders?
Actually, Rabbi Cooper, I'm trying to think of his first name. David Cooper.
Okay.
David and Shoshana Cooper, they do a silence retreat once a year.
Cooper?
Yep. He's written a number of books. One of them is God is a Verb, is one of his books, which is clearly saying that it's not something out there. It's the being. It's the doing. I'm trying to think who some of the others are. I could send you probably. I don't remember off the top of my head.
Okay.
Then there were also a number who were bringing out Kabbalah and bringing out this without reaching out to other traditions, just looking from their own tradition without having, as far as I know, any training outside of the Jewish tradition. There's some doing that also. And again, I'm very bad with remembering names, so I have to get back to you with that, I guess.
So what I'm saying is that there's a whole pipeline. So there are people who are close to the Hindu tradition, close to the Tantra tradition like yourself, who are directly involved. And then whose output is a feeding into the renewal movement, Jewish revival renewal movement. Then there are these other teachers who are not directly looking at the Tantra tradition. They're not in contact with the source, but they're in contact with people like you. They read your works. So they're kind of, in a sense, secondhand, but it's sort of like a little bit processed. It has been processed a little bit by you, and then it supplies other people who can clearly say, I have no contact with the Eastern tradition. I'm working only with the Jewish revival tradition, but I'm looking for ideas, and I'm looking for ideas from another Jewish person. So we are, within the Jewish group, we are doing this journey. And then his output will go to somebody even further away who will say that, look, I'm basically looking only internal to the Jewish tradition, and I'm meditating, and I'm in collaboration with very other deep, serious Jewish meditators. So I think there's a pipeline like that, which is interesting. So is there a convention, a gathering, something like a yoga, big yoga, conference? Is there such a Jewish thing of Kabbalah people where they talk like this? Where is it safe for you to talk like this? Openly, with a lot of Jewish people present, certainly not the Orthodox Jewish.
Right.
Okay.
So the Jewish renewal movement has developed something that they call Aleph, which is the first Hebrew letter, but A-L-A-P-H.
Okay.
And they actually now have their own seminary. They're ordaining rabbis. So that the Jewish renewal movement is getting almost to be another branch, but not quite. They don't want to be a branch, but it's beginning to look like one. So that's one. They have every other year. They have a large gathering that they call the Kala, which I think is Hebrew for gathering. I'm not sure exactly what it means.
So when they say Aleph, what does it mean to them? They have developed this term Aleph to mean what? It means it's
So
the first
Aleph-
letter of the alphabet. Aleph is the first letter of the Jewish alphabet.
Yeah, there's a
But
whole
what do
lot
they
of
mean?
there's a whole lot of it. It probably is an acronym and stands for something, but I don't know offhand what it is. But symbolically, Aleph is the one. So it's a very mystical letter. It's
So
the
it
unity.
symbolizes their movement? It symbolizes their movement?
Well, it's the name that they've given their movement. Yeah. Or their organization. I mean, the movement is still Jewish renewal, but the organization is named Aleph.
Okay.
Then the other thing that actually very interesting, strange teachings.
So Aleph is sort of like the Jewish Om.
Sort of, yeah. That has no sound. Aleph has no sound. It's a letter that needs a vowel, or else you don't have any sound. So that's one. That's kind of the closer to the traditional Jewish approach. Then there's another one, the National Havarah Committee, which is basically just an organization of all these independent little groups around the world.
Okay, National
Havarah Committee.
H with a C possibility.
I think they use H.
Okay, HAV.
URAH.
URAH.
Committee.
Committee, okay.
Okay, and all they are is just a place where these different little small Havarahs can be in touch with each other. And they have it once a year.
Okay.
What do they call it? Hang on.
Conference?
Yeah, but there's a name for it. Institute, Summer Institute. The National Havarah Committee and Summer Institute.
Where is it and how long is it?
It's a week long, and they have been having it up in New Hampshire. They're looking for a different location now, I believe. I'm not sure.
How many people go?
Last year there were several hundred, 200 or 300.
Is it for consumer or is it for a producer like you? You're a producer of knowledge.
It's both. And because it's a Havarah movement, the consumer and the producer overlap very much. So a lot of the members of Havarah, like me, might teach a class.
What about Hindu collaborator? Would he be welcome there if I want to look for a co-author, a research collaborator to look into all this Hindu-Jewish stuff? I'm a historian of religions, and I look at how new religions are formed, confluence, Prayag, and all that new kind of stuff is formed. And particularly where Hinduism is playing a role in these things. So I'm very interested. I'm writing many books at any time. I'm writing some books with Christianity and so on. I'm also writing one with Islam. The whole, the Islamization of Hinduism and the Hinduization of Islam. In India, this is happening a lot. So a lot of Indian Muslims, for example, just to divert for a second, are doing things under Hindu influence, which the people in Saudi Arabia are kind of saying this is all heretic stuff. I'm sure you're considered a heretic also by some Jewish people. So in these confluences, very interesting things happening, and I'm always looking for partners and collaborators to work with. So is there a place to go?
You probably would meet some potential interesting people there.
People who are open-minded.
Yes.
And if somebody says
again, Havarah is totally decentralized. So there's everything from very orthodox folks who happen to be part of a Havarah movement to folks like me.
But there are some people who give talks.
Oh yeah.
So suppose a Hindu wanted to give a talk on the history of this last 40, 50 years, and where does Hinduism fit in? Does it fit in the Hindu-Jewish coalition that I founded? So would they say, no, you're not one of us?
I don't know. It would be worth contacting them. I mean, the process is you contact and offer a course. You give a little short write-up of what you want to teach. And they either say yes
courses
or no.
Or talks or workshops or what?
There can be short workshops, there can be week-long courses. They have both. So I was considering doing a workshop. I don't think
because one thing I would like to do is collaborate with a person on the Jewish side and do something together, like a workshop or something, where we can bring in two sides and maybe also provoke and see where it needs to go from here into the future.
That would probably be well received by some of the folks there, by maybe a bunch of them. But
you see, the thing is this, and I'm just explaining from the Christian side what I've found with the Christians, and I don't know as much about the Jewish side. I'm trying to learn. The intermediaries who are Christians, who've done a whole lot of digestion and assimilation of Hinduism, and are presenting it to other Christians, are very jealous of a person like me. It's almost threatened, like, wow, this guy is the source. My value add is not there anymore. I am uniquely qualified in front of these guys, in front of my audience when he's not around, because I can get away with anything, and I can be the pioneer. I step in as I'm the Indiana Jones who went to the Temple of Doom and found all this weird stuff, and I cleaned it up for them. So I'm the frontiersman who's gone to the frontier and brought all this back. Whereas if this guy, he's the Native American, he's this red Indian who's come with all his feathers and he's come in there. Now why do they need me? So it's difficult for me to say, okay, listen, we can work together on this. Because I'll keep the authenticity and the integrity, and I'll raise some counterpoints, which is always very healthy in any discovery process. Very few of the people who are these intermediaries are actually open to such a collaboration, because most of them will say, I'll quietly, privately learn from whatever I have to, and then I go to this organization and present it as something I've pioneered. What do you think the Jews will feel like in this respect?
Well, I think people are people.
Okay.
But I think the Havara movement is more likely to be receptive than other places.
Good.
Because it's not, I mean, one of the main things about it is it's not a lot of ego driven. That somebody who teaches this year will be a student next year. Somebody who's done a workshop, you may be sitting next to them.
So they're experimenting.
Absolutely.
It's a crucible for
Yes.
investigation and experimentation.
This past summer, I took a course on making Jewish talismans, amulets. And it looked at the history of it and where it was, the context. But then it was like we were sitting there making these, things.
Yeah. See, the thing is that you have a lot of entrepreneurs and small players and hobbyists they don't have an ego, but then you have giant bestseller people. People whose books are in. You go to Barnes and Noble, or you go to some place and they are big top 10 spiritual but not religious, all those kind of guys. They are they have an agenda. I mean, they know they are doing it like any corporate multinational, looking for market share and looking for brand and all that stuff. So those guys are tough nut to crack. What do you think? I mean, in the Jewish side, there must be such people.
I'm sure there are. My experience with folks, I mean, I've not spent a lot of time, but at least I've done a workshop or so with quite a few of these folks, and I don't see that in them.
So you feel they're generally open-minded.
Yeah, I mean the ones that I've dealt with, the ones in the Havara movement, the ones in Jewish renewal movement.
So I find that often the producers of this hybrid knowledge are open-minded, but then their consumers are specifically Jewish or specifically Christian. And it's the consumer pulling them in a certain direction. Like Deepak Chopra was a Maharishi follower. Now, nothing relevant to Judaism, but his relationship with Hinduism and with Christianity has moved, not because of his private thing, because in his personal life he's still very much Vedic, but the market has moved in a certain way. It's what his book agent tells him will be the next bestseller. What he ought to say on Oprah and what he shouldn't say. How he should dress, what exact. So you look at the early Deepak Chopra when he was in the Maharishi movement. He was as Vedic and Hindu as Maharishi. And then you look at the early, once he's launched his satellite, the rocket is still stage 1 rocket. It's still quite a lot of it that way. Then as he moves on and on, he sheds these rockets and the new rockets take over. He becomes different. And I don't know if it is this is shift from within or without, because the shift from without is what's the marketplace telling you, what is the rankings, what is the next guy who wants to interview on TV, what are the talking points they're looking for, who's the audience, what is the feedback letters to the person, what are the people asking for. So I think it's often not the ego of the person, but their pliability and malleability and flexibility to dealing with what the market wants. You think that's...
That makes a lot of sense.
I mean, Jews are smart business people. They're very smart. There's one Katz, K-A-T-Z, Norman Katz or Harman Katz, some guy like that. He's a rabbi who did a PhD in Hinduism, and he wrote some books. And I asked him about all this, that we were in a Vedic conference you say this, in a Jewish conference you say that, and I saw it some of his books also. He says, because my mom always taught me to go where the market is. So I'm a Jewish guy,
Sure.
we know where the money is. So it's not like purity.
Right.
I mean, it's not like, we're all pure people.
Right.
After all, they are, as you said, human beings are human beings.
Sure.
So there is such a thing as fame, prestige, fortune, being
Sure.
a pioneer. So that must be, I'm sure that must be driving.
I'm sure it's there.
Yeah.
But like I said, the Havara movement is probably the least likely place
Least
to find
likely,
that.
yeah, because they're all experimental. So this is fascinating. So what I wanted to discuss, what I wrote are a couple of things here. One is this. What do you think is happening to Jewish identity? Okay, by identity I mean the importance. It would be one thing if people who are of Jewish origin said, I don't care about identities, I don't care whether I call it Judaism or whatever. I'm learning it for the science and for the practice and the technology and the experience, and I'm learning it from all sides.
Mm-hmm.
Then I would say, okay, that is absolutely, in their case, there's no ego, collective ego of being Jewish. But if at the end of the day the person is very interested in looking for these things in Kabbalah, and teaching their kids, son and daughter, saying, okay, you be proud Jew, now we know why we're Jews. See, we lasted all this long for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
We were not chosen for nothing. We got all this. We lost it somewhere on the way. So how important do you think to your clientele is identity?
It's quite variable. To a lot of people, not so much the religion, but the identity, the culture, the history is important.
But what reason do they give in today's world of so much movement and so much? Why is it important now? If they really are convinced that this, whether it is Sri Chakra, whether it is the 13 chapters in the Bible, whether it is Psalm 23, whether it is Kundalini, it's all basically science. It's got nothing to do with these old identities, and these identities were political formation we don't need. If they truly believe in that, then why would it matter to them that I've got to call myself Jewish?
I don't know that they really believe in that though. There's a tribe.
You're saying
a tribe sense in Judaism,
you're saying that you're not sure that they truly believe in the scientific value of that.
or that's all there is to it.
Okay, yeah.
Because Judaism.
There is a tribal.
There's a tribal sense to it. It's a religion on top of, but it's the tribe of Abraham. It's family. It's extended family.
Now
That's the nature of it that I think goes even deeper than the religion.
good point. So because while Christianity can say it's not a tribal thing, it's more a kind of an ideology.
Yeah.
That everybody can have.
Mm-hmm.
The Jewish is very tribal oriented. So what keeps that tribe so solidly intact that they will put a religion to stay together as a tribe? As you said, they've worn the clothes of a religion.
Mm-hmm.
Now they may put on the clothes of old science and all that based on Kabbalah. So there may be many layers of clothing, one on top of the other. To each time the clothes sort of fall apart or get compromised or are in trouble, get challenged at least, then just go look for another pair of clothes put on top. But inside, deep inside, is this tribal identity that wants to preserve itself. If that is a valid way of thinking, what is the reason for that? I mean, you're probably one of the most enlightened persons. You've gone through so many traditions. You've gone deconstructed. The Sri Chakra also gets you deconstructed. So deconstructing all of that, you had these experiences. So when from those experiences you see your fellow Jewish people, some of them your students, and they're really driven by this need for finding the Jewish greatness, and no matter where, maybe if we lost it, we already had it. We find out some Sri Yantra, we'll find out that this we already had. What is that driving force?
Very good question. I don't know. It's a shared identity, a shared consciousness, a history. It's very difficult to say.
So here's a opening.
Mhm.
Reincarnation would do away with that. Because if somebody believed in reincarnation, then in my previous life I may have been a Chinese, I may have been an African, before that I may have been an elephant, before that I was a woman, before that I was a white person, before that I was a Jew. I've been through all of those. So my past as Rajiv's previous lives has nothing to do with my biological ancestry. So ultimately who I am and where I have been is not a particular biological thing. So would a true, honest, meditation as reincarnated person, if you were to create that meditation, if you were to take a Hindu meditation which goes into past lives as many, many beings, Buddhists also have that, and find something in the Kabbalah that says that, we've been all this, I was once upon a time, I was a slave, once upon a time I was a pharaoh, once upon a time I was this and that. If you were to get the Jews into that, would it deconstruct the tribal identity?
Very interesting, because
it would be very risky.
Because if you go back into the Kabbalistic idea of reincarnation, they talk about a quote Jewish soul.
Okay.
So that you don't lose that identity from life to life.
See,
they have their way around it.
So this is very interesting. This is a very interesting thing I have learned, because I must thank you for that, because I have all this conversation with so many of my Jewish friends, and they never told me that the reincarnation is Jewish soul. They say, oh, reincarnation, we also have it. Oh, we also have it. But they don't tell you the whole truth, that this is reincarnation, not in the Hindu sense, because in the Hindu sense and Buddhist sense, I've been an ant.
Yeah.
I have been a tiger. I have been all these.
Right.
I've been the predator and I've been the prey. So I am experiencing, I have the repository of all kinds of experiences in me. So my idea of globalization and oneness is that I see that in everybody.
Sure.
I see that in the past, in his life, my life, we were back once upon a time, we were brothers, we were whatever we were. So I'm open to all of that.
Yeah.
But if there is this idea that there is this capital Jewish soul of which all the Jews are members, and the reincarnation is kind of an internal recycling.
Sort of. And I mean, I'm not an expert on this aspect of it, but the little bit that I've learned is like this being is made up of it's a sort of a composite soul.
Yeah.
And it sort of recombines in different ways. But somehow in there is a Jewish aspect of it.
So my strategy to deconstruct the tribal identity using reincarnation won't work. People will say, ups, don't make me an elephant, or don't make me this other guy. Pharaoh I cannot be. See, we are told that you may have in a past life, you may have been the foreign invader and oppressor who came here and killed all the people, and now you're reincarnated to sort of do the other way around. So we're taught all that.
Yeah, I know.
This is part of the Hindu greatness, I think, that you can transcend beyond your thing.
Yeah. And again, I'm not an expert on that field. There may be an aspect of that in Jewish Kabbalah that I'm not aware of also. But the little bit that I've learned talks about this, in fact, there's some talk about, certain ways that the Jewish soul can do certain things and all the other souls do something, act in some other way.
So the real boundary to cross for this whole satsang movement would be to get past those things.
Yeah.
Because as long as you're within those things, you're still upgrading Judaism. While you're saying, okay, we're bringing all the confidence together and all that, you are really, the big river, which is Judaism, is really wanting to assimilate the little stream called Hinduism, because while you say something new will emerge, but that something new is going to be, okay, we are still the same river, we're still that soul, we got to reincarnate. It's the Jewish reincarnation of a Jewish river, in a sense. I mean, this reincarnation has to be a Jewish reincarnation. Because if you were to say that, this new thing is a new entity, it is not part of anything in the past, we are leaving that as a previous birth. So this new birth is genuinely a new river. If you were to say that, a lot of the clientele will walk away. Because they'll say, oops, no, you are now, you're smuggling us back into this paganism. Whatever they say.
That could be. I don't know.
Because you have this monotheistic river and this pagan, vibrant, exciting, exotic stream coming in, and what comes out, if you are true to the Hindu teachings, then what comes out would be considered by these Orthodox, by the Jewish clientele, would be considered very pagan, dangerous. And I think we're told not to go there. We don't want to go there. And our friend Rabbi Siegel Stephen Siegel is taking us there. They would be worried, right?
Yeah.
They would be worried. Yeah. So you have to then make the choice as the supplier, as the producer, that am I going to go really with my Swami Rama experience and say, "Oh, this is what it is. Now you guys get out of there. You guys have to get past this identity, tribal identity." Or are you going to say, "Listen, this is my market. I did all this. I benefit a lot. Good for me. 4 o'clock in the morning, I meet my Swami Rama. But from 9 o'clock to 6 o'clock, when I'm out there doing my satsang, I'm going to supply what the market needs." So this is your choice.
It's a very interesting idea, yeah. See, I never looked at it that way. I looked at the streams as being technique streams rather than something deeper. So it's a very,
Something to think
very
about.
interesting point, yeah.
Yeah. So the final provocation I want to leave you with is your remark about the trappings of the guru, the body. Now this, I think, a very Western, the limits to Hinduism, the limits to how tolerant and respectful I can be of Hinduism, most Westerners would say, I wouldn't go to the extent of really considering this living enlightened master to be an incarnation or somebody where if I'm really attached, including the touching the feet and doing all the things that one would do to a deity, that far I wouldn't go. Most Westerners who have been for all their lives into Hinduism would not go that far. Except maybe ISKCON, where the bhakti was, it took them there. So now I want to leave you with a quantum physics idea, very fashionable in the West, the new thought. You know, the new thought movement started, and there's another wave of Hindu Buddhist influences, and the new thought, now it's the new thought. Quantum physics says that tiny photons get entangled, or electrons get entangled, and so even when they're separated for galaxies apart, if something happens to one, effect happens. Then some people like Amit Goswami, who worked in my foundation in the early 90s, for 3 years we gave him this grant. He wrote a book called The Self-Aware Universe, which influenced a lot of the new thought, where consciousness has this quantum effect. And the Maharishi's people, John Hagelin, who runs the Maharishi University, he's an eminent physicist from Harvard, but a lifelong, very devoted, very loyal, sincere Maharishi follower. In his physics, he writes about this entanglement, the quantum entanglement of consciousness. So now there's evidence. Neuroscientists have found that if two people are related, maybe they're twins who separated, or they meditated, two strangers like you and me, we just come meet each other, and we do a series of meditations. And then we're separated. They take your brain and they give a stimulus to your eyes, some light, and it triggers certain neurons. So they measure neurons are activated because of stimulus in the eye. I'm sitting in another room, far away, and they're measuring those neurons, but no light has been put in me, and those same neurons activate in me. So these are called mirror neurons. Mirror neurons. And this mirror neuron is a very fascinating concept, because it shows there's some kind of entanglement, and this entanglement between us happens when we are meditating, for instance. They've also found that 95+% of the brain is not being used by most of us, and when you go into higher states of consciousness, more and more of that dark brain becomes lit up. So this proves that there were people like rishis at one time, because they used it, otherwise the brain wouldn't exist. So when you start putting all this evidence together, it seems there is a physics to the following claim, that a certain being who's enlightened, who is quantum entangled with the Supreme. This enlightened being the avatar is a quantum entangled with the Supreme. Becomes a user-friendly access for ordinary people. So while you may say, let's get entangled with Yahweh or worship Yahweh, and the Kabbala might say that, the point is Kabbala, Yahweh is not available. He's sort of too far out. And this guru, who is genuine, an honest one, not a sort of a fraud one, but a real honest one, who has achieved this enlightenment, is a local representation of this infinite outside. The manifestation is a manifestation of the infinite that's beyond. So rather than saying that don't worship images, you must worship images, because this particular kind of image is in fact a replica and a quantum entanglement of something which is beyond. So it's more user-friendly for you to get entangled with this guy. It is more user-friendly for you to get entangled with this living guru, because he's friendly, he talks back, he sits down and tells you jokes, and you eat meals together, you go sing, dance. So he's more like me. So it's easier for me to be close to him. Whereas the God above, who's unmanifest, is too abstract an idea. I might do it 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm okay for half an hour. But then, rest of the day I'm not going to be so much committed. So this is my response from the physics of bhakti. This is the physics of bhakti, the quantum physics of bhakti. And I'm writing on this. I'm writing the quantum entanglement as sort of the metaphysics of bhakti, Hindu bhakti. You may want to think about it. Maybe we can be in touch and talk about it later. Because I feel that this puts a whole new legitimacy and a whole new value to this idea of bhakti for the Guru Seva and the Guru Bhakti. Because his Guru is an entanglement with the divine on one side, and I can entangle with him and then get entangled to the divine as his stepping stone for me. So what do you think of that? So tell me.
So it's very interesting. I agree that being near, having satsang, all of that, but at the same time, on a different level, he's a man, he's a person. He may be enlightened, so I don't worship people. However, I can respect him, I can honor him, I can listen to his advice and what he says to do. And then, on yet another level, we're all there. We just got all the veils in front of us blocking it. It's like, I don't need to worship someone, I need to get myself there. That's the purpose. And he's someone that can help me get there.
So, he is just a regular person, but he has achieved a certain state of quantum entanglement.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like you and I meditated together, and when they tested your eyes with the light, it lit up, but with some other random guy, it won't happen because you're not so entangled. And so he's a guru, because he's an enlightened guru, because he's achieved for 40 years, 50 years in prior lives, he's achieved this entanglement with the divine, and which regular people haven't. So he has something special that others don't. So it could also be as simple as, you hang around with a tennis coach because he's a great coach, but I'm not a tennis coach, so hang around me, it's not going to help you. So you cannot use the argument that he's just another person, because I'm another, the tennis coach is someone special. Yeah. So he is someone special, that much you would admit.
Oh, absolutely.
That way, even a rabbi is someone special, but now we're talking about going, how special is special? How special can special get?
Yes.
And the case I'm making from quantum entanglement is that it's not just dry knowledge, it's not just I'll teach you factually, which I could teach in a video.
No, it's experience.
It is experience, and there is a certain Shakti entanglement. Shakti path is an entanglement phenomenon. It's the physics of entanglement, which says, okay, I touch your hand and I've transmitted billion terabytes just of Shakti software into you. That's what the guy is saying, the one who does Shakti path. So it doesn't mean that Shakti path also for you is not really working. He's just a symbolic thing and so kind of a hypnosis. Because if Shakti path works, then you are accepting that there is such a thing as a state of consciousness which is being transmitted through this high-speed pen drive into you.
Right.
You're downloading this guy's Shakti path.
Yes.
So what do you think of that?
I absolutely agree. But I come back to what all of the teachers teach, which is that there is only the one.
Yes.
So you and I are the same place that Swami Rama was. We just have it so covered over and hidden with this stuff that it's not obvious. So our job is to uncover that. And Swami Rama is an inspiration and an energy source and whatever you want to call it to make that happen.
So what we are saying is, energy source and inspiration can be extended to entanglement and say, okay, then if there is entanglement possibility, because he has uncovered it, he is where we want to go, then is the proximity and certain rituals and procedures of Guru Seva protocols for entanglement to work for me.
Okay. I never learned or had a relationship of that nature with the Guru.
At least you're open.
Else. But I'm open to the possibility.
What you're saying, it is possible, but in your 50 years, you haven't seen it that way. You've seen the Guru as a teacher, like somebody,
Well, and no, I mean, there definitely is an energy exchange. There's no question about that. And the entanglement from a physics point of view makes sense. But I don't see that specific rituals in any tradition are necessarily what make that possible.
Okay.
I think
so. I'm going to introduce
an early question I asked when we were first learning some of the tantric techniques and how to hold your hand and how to present the fire offering and what mantras to say. My first question was, why do we do all this stuff? Why don't we just sit in the lap of the mother and just be there? That's what we need to do. And the teacher agreed. He said, that's all we need to do. But who can do it other than Swami Rama? Swami Rama says, don't mention the mother to me because I go there. And then it's going to take me a couple of minutes to come back and talk to you again. But the rest of us, don't have that tight a connection.
So there's a whole. You're one of the Westerners most widely read in Hindu texts. I mean, I can see that you've read a lot and studied a lot. So I want to recommend that there's the largest collection of texts is the least known. It's called Agamas. Agamas are protocols, procedures, technologies, do's and don'ts. Why you don't put on your shoes, and why you use your right hand and put this flour, and why you put the ghee, and why you pour this milk and this water. The text for Agamas, architecture of temples, design, building, operation, every ritual, the how, why of rituals is explained in Agamas. And I'm discovering more and more about the importance of Agamas, and just something for you to think about. Maybe that will be the next frontier of discovering through the Agamas the sense of Jewish rituals. Because a lot of people tell me when I go to my Jewish friends for some event, they'll say, well, we do this because our ancestors did it. Don't ask me why.
Right, yeah.
Why the Star of David had 6 stars? I told them it's because 3 triangles down there, 1 triangle going up. This is the male, female. They'll say, oh, wow, no rabbi told me that. But they have so many symbols, so many rituals going on. They have no clue what it is. And their rabbis cannot tell them other than we are tribal, we just follow the tribe. So I think the detribalization, detribalization requires a more intelligent, physics-oriented, scientific-oriented reinterpretation of what it means to be a Jew, and understanding the Hindu Agamas might lead them there.
Very interesting.
Do you think that's a possibility?
It's a very interesting idea.
So now I've given you for another lifetime.
Right. Next lifetime.
I mean, this is if you to study the Hindu Agamas and to study this whole business of why the tribalism is there, why what is it, what are the limits of knowledge exchange between Hindus and Jews within the parameters of the tribalism versus how could the tribalism be burst open, and then we could really honestly be having this exchange without the identity that is my identity, this is the border.
Yeah.
Because a lot of Hindus would feel a little bit cheated. They would say, I am being told let's be same, okay?
Except we're not.
Except we're not.
Yeah.
The Jews know that we're not, but we are being deceived by our own gurus to think that we are all the same. So a lot of Hindus, I'm waking up to say, hey, challenge your Hindu guru when he says we're all the same, because if X is same as Y, then Y is same as X. Yeah. But the Y is saying, hey, listen, I'm this tribal Y, and you, the X, I'm going to take in what I need. The X is making a fool of himself, thinking that, listen, this guy's actually dropped his identity, mask, which he hasn't. So we the Hindus, a lot of the Hindus here are 90% of them are confused about this. Most of them are confused about it because they really think that everybody else is into this. We're all same, so we should also be fashionable. We'll also be same, and so we start giving up our Hindu identity, our Vedic Sanatana Dharma identity. It's maybe some of the gurus also, and I have to ask Panditji where he stands on this because he talks a little bit that way also. So,
an interesting idea, because I'm noticing the younger generation of Jews are much less of this tribal, and they're more like the Hindu.
Yeah.
So I think it may be happening on its own without somebody breaking it open. It just takes a couple of generations to happen.
We need to engage such people.
Yeah.
And maybe after this interview, which I want to thank you for, I think we should continue. We should discuss some of these things, and maybe we can have some focus groups and forums and debates, and have different points of view, from the most orthodox to the most liberal, and everybody in between.
Great.
Yeah. Right now. So I think it's interesting. You made some points about what are the differences between Judaism and Hinduism, which the Jewish people, even though they like Hinduism a lot and like many things about it, won't be able to accept certain aspects. So we talked about a few. So one more is that I want to ask your view is, why are gurus considered suspect or the claim of being really divine presence is not considered acceptable. And this is true of all the Abrahamic religions, but I'll ask the Jewish point of view because you guys came first.
Yeah, I think that probably is a strain that's gone all through the history, but became much more enforced after the destruction of the temple, because prior to that, there were priests who did sacrifices. There was it was a religion very much like, you know, a lot of aspects like Hinduism. There was an intermediary, there were a priestly class, there were Levites, which were the next level down from the priests that did certain things. But after the temple was destroyed, there was a clear effort by leaders, by sages, to create some form of the religion that no longer depended on that. And that was very deeply ingrained into modern Judaism, that there is no intermediary, that's what it used to be, but that's not the way it is now. Now prayers have replaced the sacrifices, and the home activity has replaced a lot of the temple activity.
So were there prophets after that or no more prophets?
No, prophets were before that.
So it ended prophets.
Yeah.
And replaced it with a book, saying this book gives you, this shastra gives you the knowledge, and there are no intermediaries.
No intermediaries.
There's several issues here with Hinduism I want to talk about. One is the distinction between prophets in the Abrahamic religions and what would be considered avatars and enlightened rishis. There's a difference there. So there are, even the intermediaries are of different kinds.
Right. So
in the case of the prophets never said, I'm enlightened and I'm Satchitanand and this is I am the truth.
Mm-hmm.
I have achieved the state of enlightenment of oneness where I am telling the truth. The prophet always positions himself as, God has said this to me. There's a duality between God and me, and I'm saying it to you.
Yes, in fact, there's this a concept or an idea with regard to the prophets that they completely destroy their ego. They are just a conduit.
Right.
That they have no input whatsoever. That they're just a way for God to contact the people.
So dissolving the ego is also considered one thing in Hinduism, but here it has a different meaning in the sense that I've dissolved the ego in the sense that I'm not going to filter and contaminate the message, and I'm not originating the message. But it does not mean that this is now this is a message from myself. This is a message from God,
right.
And God is other from the prophet.
From that point of view.
From that point of view, God is other. God A has passed the message to B to be transmitted to C.
Yes.
That's really how it works.
That's the
Whereas in the Rishi stage, the Rishis says that A, B are one. I have achieved oneness with A, such that I'm no longer B, as you can see me when the body is B, but I'm so much connected with A that I'm actually one. And so I'm speaking through my voice in this body, but actually it's A's voice. So there's a different connection between A and B. So that's one difference. So then there is the avatar, where it is not a rishi who's enlightened into being the one, but the one incarnates in a body. And that never happens in Judaism. There's no Jewish incarnation in man.
Correct.
This is very important for people to understand because they keep going on saying, "Oh, it's all the same," but it's not the same.
Because that's the main difference between Judaism and Christianity. Is that there is that
Jesus.
Jesus
is the one. This is the one and only claim of anyone similar to an avatar.
Yes.
And the claim is very clear that this is the only one. There's never been one before or after, being the only Son of God and things like that. Yeah. Okay. So therefore, the one difference between the prophet and the guru is that the prophet, the state of enlightenment is not something claimed by the prophet. The prophet is just saying, "I'm a messenger. I'm the PR man." I mean, sort of like, or I'm the HR guy, HR department. I'll tell you what the policies are. I mean, the boss made the policies. Right. I'm just conveying them to you. That's sort of what the prophet says.
Sure.
So then the second thing is, the second issue you raised is the intermediaries of all sorts were done away with in a historic moment called the destruction of the temple.
Right.
When, about which year or which century did that happen? How far back is that, the destruction of the temple?
I'm trying to think. It's Roman times, so it's sometime
a few hundred years BC, probably.
No, within 100 years
After Jesus. So Jesus had arrived.
Because Jesus went to the temple. So it was still
Oh,
there when
of
he was
course,
around.
Of course.
So
could
which is shortly after that.
So could this be some relationship with Christianity? Could it be a reaction to that? Or you think it's independent?
I think it's independent, but again, I'm not a historian.
Right.
There may have been some reaction that, this guy stepped over the bounds too far and look what he did. He got the Romans so mad at us that they destroyed the temple.
So
I mean, that's a possibility.
We should get rid of all these quacks.
Right. It's not the story I've heard, but that's a possibility.
Well, the rabbis considered him to be a quack. I mean, they considered Jesus to be a fraud.
I don't know that that's necessarily
But
true.
did they accept him as a Messiah?
No.
Then he was a quack. I mean, his major claim that he's son of God was rejected. His claim that he's the incarnation.
Yeah, his claim that he's an avatar, an incarnation, is rejected.
He did. So because that is his signature claim,
Mm-hmm.
for the Jews at the time, the authority at the time, he's a quack because he's making this claim. If
Sure.
they were to accept that, then they would become Christian.
Of course, yes. For the authorities at the time, I think for the common people living in the area who had heard him, some of them followed him in that direction. Some of them just said he was a really good teacher, but he went a little too far there.
So setting that aside, because you feel that the abandonment of priests was an independent thing in Judaism. So the abandonment of priests in Hinduism, we've never had abandonment of gurus.
Right.
We've never said
Right.
that the book is all there is. Abandon all the gurus and basically abandon all the deities because they're intermediaries. Basically, it's you and the book, and that's all you need. We've never had that kind of movement,
Right.
or at least not a mainstream one.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a big difference between Judaism and Hinduism, because when a Jew sees a guru, then all those ideas come up of what has been rejected. So do you think that this also has another implication, that in Hinduism, you can the authority is decentralized precisely because there are so many gurus, and when you do away with the intermediaries of whatever kind, then you consolidate authority and power, because it allows you to say no one else can do or anything. It's just written in this book, and we are the authority of the book.
Right, and see, it removes authority from people,
Right.
and places it in a tradition.
Right.
Now, the other thing to understand about the book, though, is, there's the Old Testament, the Torah, which is the authority.
Right.
Then there's this commentary or discussion about that, which is much larger, called the Talmud, which in Orthodoxy is the authority. That's where they go. It's the discussion of the rabbis. It's not necessarily what God said. It's all the discussions over the years of what the sages and rabbis said that then becomes the rules.
Yeah.
I mean, the perfect example, in the Torah, it says, "Thou shalt not seethe the kid in its mother's milk." That was a common type of dish that was served in the Middle East in those days. They would cook a young cow in milk. So that was prohibited. Through hundreds of pages of discussion, you now have to have a separate set of dishes, and milk is eaten on this way, and some people have separate sinks that they don't wash in the same place. That's all the rabbis. It's not in the book. And it's a living thing also. That there's a book that's the authority, but there's what's called responsa. Over the years, rabbis have written commentaries in response to something that's in there and said, "I'm interpreting it this way."
Right.
And it's different from how it was interpreted before. So it's still a living, growing thing, but there's no intermediary. There's no one person that's the authority, no central board that's the authority.
So do you feel that the experiential dimension, which is what Hinduism is known for, what draws you to Hinduism, is the experiential dimension? I mean, it's not a book that you mentioned your experiences with Swami Ram, meditation.
Right.
So it's the desire to achieve a certain experience in yourself. That is what draws Jews to Hinduism, I would assume.
I would think so, yeah.
And a lot of them say that. And it seems that being closed and the knowledge being placed in the book, and the book is closed, turned the whole thing from experiential to intellectual.
Yes.
Okay, so this business of doing away with intermediaries also does away with experience. because these intermediaries bring their
They brought
experience.
experience. That's
Yeah.
right. Absolutely.
And so, but turning it over to the book means you now turn it over to a bunch of intellectual scholars, so who can nitpick about what the book said and didn't say.
Yeah.
And as time goes by, it lends itself to state authority control over interpretation, because now it's a book and human beings are going to interpret it, and who appoints those human beings? So that becomes a kind of a control mechanism.
I guess that's a possibility. I don't see that as having happened. Because
In Judaism.
in Judaism, right?
But
the situation is such
Judaism starts the Abrahamic traditions, and look at it like in Islam. It's not
That's
only a book.
Yes.
Experiences are not you cannot
Right.
overrule.
Okay.
There's no more prophets, and now Saudi Arabia controls who gets to interpret. So something like that.
Sure.
And
so,
then
so the possibility
And the
exists
Shiites
that way,
claim
yes.
the rival that we have the authority too, or
Right,
we have
right.
the better authority.
Yeah.
So the whole history of the Abrahamic religions, you could say, a major milestone is the doing away with the intermediaries. Because look what it leads to. It
Yeah.
leads to the book. The book is sacrosanct, and then who controls the book, who interprets the book, that lends itself to state control.
So, yeah,
So it could be something.
could be, sure.
Okay, now the other thing I want to talk about is idolatry. A lot of Jews like everything about Hinduism, except they don't want to look at this deity. They don't want to go along with this deity. And that's part of the problem of the guru, because he and the deity seem he's claiming that he's also the living deity.
Yeah.
That's even worse. But even if you put the guru aside, this claim in the commandment of idolatry is very, very strong.
Right.
So tell me about that as a showstopper for Jews in their movement into Hinduism.
Well, I think that you've said it basically. There's a prohibition against idolatry, and from a lack of understanding, I think, of some of the deeper tenets of Hinduism, it's looked at as idolatry. Some modern thinking Jews will look at our book, at the Torah, and say, well, no, there's 5, 6, 7 different names for God,
Right.
and they're used for indicating different purposes, different
Right.
actions. In some ways, that's similar to the pantheon of Hinduist gods, that there's the creator, the destroyer, the this, the that. And here...
That's polytheism. But I'm saying, let's separate the two.
Okay, so the idols.
Simply,
the symbols.
even if there's just one God,
Right.
why do you have this stone? Why do you have this painting?
Yes, that's definitely a barrier. And I felt that myself. It's like, I can appreciate the difference in energy, that all of the concepts, the polytheism, I can appreciate what's underlying that. But it's difficult to look at a statue and want to pour milk on it or do something with it.
So, the idea that the Supreme Being is only transcendent is very important in Judaism and Christianity, whereas in Hinduism, the immanence of the being means the being is in this table lamp, his being is in this.
And again, there's different strains in Judaism, because the idea is that, yes, there's the transcendent, the I-thou relationship, but there is also the sense of the immanent, but that's just seen as within. Like some people talk about the spark of God that's in your heart.
But you wouldn't see
But you wouldn't
you
see
would
it
see
in
the
the
divine
symbol.
that same presence as this river
No.
or this tree,
Right,
or therefore you cannot see it as this stone.
right.
That's the issue.
Yes, that's the issue.
So the idea that all srishti, all creation, all existence is nothing but divine, but divine Brahman's presence or Shiva's presence is not acceptable in because it's idol worship.
I have to disagree with that. I think a lot of Jews would think that way, but the deeper teachings of Judaism, I mean, one of the main prayers that's said toward the end of every service has a line in it that says, in the heavens above and the earth below, there is only God, there is nothing else.
Okay, so why don't you use that to argue against the Jews who don't want idolatry? Why hasn't there been a Talmud debate?
Because that statue or that stone is no more God or no less God than I am or this chair is. Okay. So I don't worship the chair or you or the stone.
No, but the logical argument would be that look, I have no problem worshipping this stone, but I also worship the chair, by the way, and I also worship my shirt, because to me all of this is God, and you worship the stone, have no problem. I'll join you in that, but then I'm also going to go back to my room and worship the light bulb. In other words, if you truly believe that divinity is what exists, everything that exists is divine presence. And if you're saying that there is this one line which is recited all the time in Jewish liturgy, then why isn't there a Talmud debate between rabbis where one group of rabbis would invoke this and say, hey, why are you guys against idolatry? Idolatry is part of we are idolizing in that line. In that line, we are supporting idolatry in every single ritual.
The Hebrew language leaves room for a number of interpretations. Similar to Sanskrit, everything comes from an active root, a verb root, and any word then is expanded out. So other people will read that same line. There is, rather than saying there's nothing else, there is no other. That there's only the one. So you can interpret it a number of different ways.
So you're saying that a Jewish counter argument exists to those Jews who reject Hinduism's idolatry?
No, I'm not really saying that, because a great teacher in the 1700s, Rabbi Schneur Zalman, expanded on that, and using Kabbalistic terms from the Zohar, actually, from the main Kabbalistic work, described God as saying, surrounds all of existence and fills all of existence. And other than that, or except for that existence, there is nothing else, or there would be nothing else. So it's not that this is God. It's that God is more than this, and this is in some aspect, some way, some part of God. That God also surrounds all that is. It isn't just that God is all that is. So you can't worship this because that's worshiping a part of God. Whereas you need to worship the whole thing.
So this is interesting, because in our idea, let's say you take Shaivism, Sada Shiva, or
you can worship Shiva, you can worship the mother.
Sada Shiva
right.
manifests as form.
Right.
So form is a complete manifestation of the whole.
Right.
So the relationship between macro and micro is very interesting.
It's different.
Yeah. So micro is not necessarily a subset of macro. That's the human mind thinking that micro has to be a subset of macro. But micro has to be a subset of macro.
Yeah.
Micro can be a full representation of macro, and you can even have macro is contained within the micro. This is what Panditji was explaining yesterday.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Which is the whole foundation of what this is about.
The Sri Yantra, what it means. So I think the metaphysics of what is a proper... Jews think that the God in form is a proper subset of God, and therefore you're worshipping a proper subset. And you're not worshipping the totality of God, therefore it is bad. But firstly, we don't agree with that. That is the
right. I think that's the crux of the difference.
And then even if that were the case, why would Moses make such a big deal of a commandment out of that and say, "Thou shalt not do this"? I mean, it really seemed like some horrible thing that you're not allowed to do this. He could have said, "This is not the ultimate worship. This is an intermediary. This is a facilitator. Don't stop there, but please do start there, because you're better off than people who never get started anyway." You see what I'm saying?
He could have said that.
Yeah, he could have said. So I think there's more to it in the condemnation of idolatry.
Yeah,
I think there's more to it. I think that we can maybe one day get into the comparative theology of why worship of form is considered so horrible by all the three, Abrahamic religions, and why it is so central to us.
It's a very good question.
I think that's an important.
That's a very deep one that needs a lot.
It's a very deep, and it needs a lot of thinking. Yeah. And so many gurus are teaching to Western students, and they're following along, and then somewhere along the way they make a U-turn, something doesn't appeal to them, they reject it. But they haven't gone in the last 50, 60 years since this movement of Westerners in Hinduism, they haven't really bothered to really investigate what is the reason, what is the blockage, and let's investigate that. I think we need to do that.
That's a very good question. Yeah.
So this also takes me to the Hindu claim that the state of consciousness, which is considered enlightened state of consciousness, is not only available to all people, but an enlightened master can transmit his to yours, to you, to me. So it's like downloading, you get an exact copy of the software. You cannot say that because I got this on a small pen drive, therefore it is an incomplete subset of what Microsoft has, because it's the whole thing.
Right.
If there's not one bit of code missing, it's the whole thing. So this master's ability to achieve a state of consciousness and then in Shaktipat transmit it in a zap to you, is there such a thing available?
Not that I'm aware of. And I think it probably goes back to the same idea as the idolatry.
Right.
That it's almost looking the difference between a photograph and a hologram.
Right.
A hologram gets the whole thing. It's all there, even though it's this little tiny thing. Whereas, a photograph gets what that little photograph got. And I think that's the difference. That Hinduism is looking from the point of view of a hologram. That the individual, the guru, can be everything.
So earlier in our conversation, you mentioned that some of the large part of your the people who are in your satsang, in the group that you have, Jewish people, are interested in learning these things from Hinduism, keeping their Jewish identity. So do you go to that point where you provoke them to say, aha, you can have this or that, because if you have this, you are challenging this Jewish idea. Are you doing that? Are you saying, well, no, you can have both, and I'm the magician, I'm Merlin, I'll wave this magic wand, and you'll remain Jew, but you'll have all of this stuff also. Do you do that, or do you say, make a choice?
I don't go quite that far.
Okay.
Either of those. I say these are some really useful techniques that are available from the Eastern way of doing things that you can apply however you want, whether you want to apply them as an Eastern practice or apply them as a, quote, technology that you use in your Jewish practice is up to you. I don't take any position of authority. I just say, here's something I learned that's really interesting and useful. You might find it interesting and useful also.
A large number of Jewish people who gotten into ISKCON and Maharishi's meditation movement and many movements later end up taking a U-turn back to Judaism and withdraw from, distance themselves from, even outright reject Hinduism, outright explicitly hit at it and saying this is bad. Now, are you facilitating that in the sense, or it's not your fault, sorry. Is the Hindu guru facilitating that by inviting all these people in without explaining to them up front what it entails in terms of their own identity? Would a Hindu guru be better off, more honest and more fair to his class, to students and to his own lineage, by saying, we are going to give you a teaching which will actually violate the idolatry clause and this whole polytheism clause and this whole business about no intermediaries clause. I'm here to tell you that is my tradition. Now you can take it or you cannot take it. You can take these classes on an experimental basis and then decide, but I want you to reflect on it. I want you to think about it. I don't want you to have it in your unconscious, lurking around and have a split personality and be duplicitous in private, saying one thing, in public saying another thing, before one group of people this and one group of people that. I want you to be very bold, courageous, honest, audacious, and think about all these things. And let's think about it together. And we learn from each other. I don't know too many gurus who do that.
I don't either. And I think that's a very interesting idea. The problem being that a lot of people who would not make the U-turn at that point would not be willing to step in and try.
But it raise the threshold. It raise the threshold
raise the threshold
of honesty, courage, and experimentation. That this is you're entering a territory where anything can happen. You may have experiences where you will not want to go back. You may just want to go forward. So I'm going to take you there, and I'm going to take you to those experiences, and I'm going to show you. You will feel that in yourself, and then you will have a lot of information, personal, first-hand information on which to think. And think differently. I think that would be courageous.
Courageous is a good word for it. It's a very interesting idea because, I mean, one of the things that attracted me to Swami Rama was this institute of science and philosophy, and there were no altars here in those days. There were no Hindu practices per se. It was the science of yoga, and the science of meditation, the scientific research on breath and how that affects the body and the mind. And I don't know offhand if the other had been happening, I would have been as attracted to start with. Even though once I learned a little bit and had some background, it doesn't bother me. But initially it may have. I don't know.
You see, if you look at the Indian tradition, there is a tradition called Purva Paksha, which means you study the other's point of view. So a guru is required to have studied the Jewish tradition, especially when he takes on Jewish students.
Sure.
He's required to study the Christian traditions. He's required to have done the Purva Paksha, and they haven't done it. The gurus have not studied the other traditions like they're required to. In the past, the Hindu gurus would study the Buddhist, and they would study the Jain, they would study the Vedantin, would study the Sankhya, they would study each other's traditions in order to discuss with them, engage with them, and explain. Because only after doing Purva Paksha, which means I understand your tradition as sincerely and as honestly as you understand it, then there is the Uttar Paksha, which means I give my perspective in response, saying, here is how I think about it. So first I understand your ideology position, which is your ideology. I must understand it. I must understand the history, the why, what not, and then I'll tell you my Uttar Paksha. Here's my response to it. Only then can we have a conversation, because now I understand you, and you should do the same about me. So this honesty and integrity of the Purva Paksha system has been lost by the modern gurus. I have a problem against that. One of the books I'm writing now is basically to show that this shortcut or this marketing convenience, because maybe
that's what it is.
Marketing convenience, because as you said, maybe scare some Western students away, and the guru says, okay, as a matter of convenience, I'd rather have as many students because it's good business than to hold the integrity of my tradition of Purva Paksha.
Well, to make it a little bit better light than marketing, because these people are craving what I have to offer, and I don't want to turn them off before they have an opportunity to see it.
Okay.
So but the same thing.
That would mean I should have an introductory level at which I don't scare them away, at which I invite all of them and give them some experience.
But then it should be then
there should be levels. At some level, I have to sit down with them. Because our tradition says you don't do Shaktipat to everybody.
Right.
And our gurus are doing it. Okay.
Yes.
Don't do Shaktipat to everybody. There are prerequisites. Like in Harvard, you don't take a postgraduate course. You have to satisfy some prerequisites, or any school.
Sure.
And not everybody gets into the university. A lot of people apply, they get rejected. That was the case with gurus. Prominent gurus would take certain people on a selective basis, and these people would have to go through rigor and prove themselves before they would be initiated to the next level and the next level. So at some stage, before giving Shaktipat and giving them all the stuff, the guru is required to have done this Purva Paksha and made sure that the student knows what he's getting into and what are the issues with his prior identity. Because as you said earlier in this conversation, Jews have a tribal identity. And around that tribal identity, which is by race, by birth, ethnicity, around that is built the religion and all those things. Which is why there are secular Jews. There are atheist Jews. They look at the tribal identity part of their Judaism. So a guru who's spent decades in the West and has hundreds or thousands of Western followers, and that is a large part of his overall guru practice, should have by now done this Purva Paksha to understand the client base and to counsel them, advise them, and say, okay, these are the encounters you're going to have, and I'm going to be there with you, and I'm going to be an honest coach, and I will help you. And if you decide that, okay, this is too much, fine, but at least you will have all the knowledge going in. I think this has not been done.
That's a great idea, yes.
It's not been done. So I feel that rather than blaming Westerners who are U-turning, which is my project of the U-turn theory has been there for 25 years. I'm researching Westerners, why they U-turn, why they don't. I think it's a kind of an incompatible, it's a kind of a flawed transaction between supplier and consumer, where they really haven't had the right kind of conversations. And every time I go to an ashram and listen to another guru talking, I say, he ought to be saying this now. he ought to be saying such and such thing. Because it's almost like he's stopping, he's not saying certain things for whatever reason.
Yeah.
It's like, don't ask, don't tell.
He's right, same idea, he's censoring himself.
It's
Right.
self-censorship. I won't tell you certain things, don't ask me certain things, we won't go to a certain place. And the Western consumers are lapping up what they're told, they're also very happy about it. He's not telling them certain things, they don't want to hear it. And so this discomfort is never brought to the surface. I consider that to be lack of honesty. I really
Yeah.
do. So, and it's not the fault of either one or the other. The two of
It's
them
just-
have to really.
Yeah, the communication lines just weren't there.
Do you agree with this?
Yes, it makes perfect sense.
But do you think it could also save a lot of lives who feel very angry and bitter later on? They say, I wasted 10 years, 20 years, no one told me. And then they go and say, looking for Christian yoga because the yoga can only be Christian and only if this is Christ center, it can be yoga. And sun and the Surya Namaskar has to be translated sun salutation, sun as in S-O-N, son of God. You know?
I hadn't heard that one, that's
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. So all that kind of weird stuff that's going on now can be traced back to this lack of Purva Paksha by the Gurus.
It makes sense. Yeah.
Because the supplier knows more about his product. And if I supply you a product, it creates all this confusion. And I know about it. I should be disclosing more. The label should say,
Sure.
this shall challenge your views on idolatry.
Right.
This shall challenge the following commandment, It should say that. And then I think everybody is welcome. And when we say truth is one, universal, of course truth is one, universal and so on. Everybody can benefit from yoga, no doubt. But there are certain metaphysical premises on which yoga is built. And we cannot clip those away just because some people won't like them. What do you think of that?
It's hard to react to because I feel very comfortable, quote, clipping some of that away.
Okay.
I feel very comfortable with the, all of the philosophy and technology of yoga and meditation, the Yoga Sutras, where I read, the name of one of the gods or something, and I don't read it that way. I read it as, this way of looking at.
So you
I do my own self translating.
Yeah. So you have a Jewish context in which you're looking at the Hindu thing.
Yeah.
And you read it the way a Jew would read it.
Yeah.
And
it doesn't bother me.
No.
But I don't think of it as, when I was in India, I went to the Badni temple. Luckily, that's a Sri Yantra temple. It doesn't have any little rocks or statues or anything in the whole thing. But it didn't bother me at all to do puja there, to give something there, because I'm honoring, in this case, what it represents, which is the opposite of what we learned the other night. That's not what it represents; it's what it is. But I could relate to it as though that's what it was. So I guess I'm kind of fooling myself in those situations.
And I'm very appreciative of your honesty, because what you're saying is, I bring my Jewish context, and I have my tradition, learning and all that, and I do these Hindu things, but I interpret it in my own context.
Yeah.
And I interpret it selectively. Some things I'll block. I won't even want to bother including them. Some things I will include, but I will re-characterize it reformulate it in my own way.
Yeah.
So this recontextualizing Hinduism, recontextualizing Hinduism into Judeo-Christianity is what I call stage 3. Stage 1 is immersion and understanding the Hindu stuff as it is on its own face value. That is called the Western Purva Paksha of Hindu. He's understanding. Then stage 2 is decontextualizing and putting it into neutral territory. So this is the YMCA yoga. This is the Oprah Winfrey meditation. It's neither Hindu nor Jewish. It's sort of like, it's a way of life and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So then stage 3 is I've recontextualized it as Judaism. For myself and for my clients, for the people I teach, like in your case. So you are recontextualizing the puja, the mandala in a Jewish context. And that's fine with me, that's recontextualizing. What I don't like is stage 4, when the person says, I now have to reject the source to justify what I've done. I have to say it's bad, something wrong with it. A lot of people have done that. A lot of Jews have done that to ISKCON and various things. A lot of scholars have done that. Ken Wilber, a great, very famous guy, has done that. Not he and I'm writing a whole book on the Ken Wilber, the whole Ken Wilber conspiracy. So I studied the people in various stages of U-turns. So what you're saying is you're at stage 3 in the sense that you perform all the rituals, you practice, you respect gurus and all that, but you filter it through a Jewish lens, Jewish drishti, and then you bring it back into Judaism and bring what works in Judaism.
Yeah. So,
but there are some Jews who say, I'm willing to drop that lens, and I'm going to go all the way. So that was my interest in finding out what determines the type that will say, I keep my Jewish lens and I receive it with respect. I have no irreverence. I'm not going to go attack it and all that, because obviously for 50 years you've been into Hinduism and you respect it. I've seen you respect it. I respect it, but I respect it as a Jew looking at it from my point of view. That versus the other guy who says, I'm willing to drop all this and just go and, in essence, become a Hindu.
Right.
So how do you feel about these two?
I don't think it's a question of how I feel. It's if that's what is they're right for them in this lifetime, in this stage of their growth, then that's what's right for them.
Was there something you couldn't accept in Hinduism and therefore you put on the Judaism, or is it the other way around? Is there a reason you cannot let go of that identity, and therefore that becomes a limiting factor as to what will get through and what will be rejected?
I think it's probably closer to the second.
Okay.
That we can only experience what our background and our knowledge base, DNA allows us to experience. You know, it's like if I.
So you feel that being Jewish is hardwired into you? That it's
well,
kind of
I would say DNA is a little too strong.
DNA, okay.
But it's a tradition I'm used to. It's what I grew up experiencing.
Your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Your friends and family.
Yes, friends and family, comfort zone. And in some respects, you know, going to India, doing these things, is stretching that comfort zone. And that's good. To stretch the comfort zone.
Yes.
And I think what may have happened is some of these people who you talk about making the U-turn maybe stretched too far and broke the comfort zone. They were no longer comfortable in it. Had to run back. It's like a rubber band, you know, pops back.
Well, when they break the comfort zone, it could go either way.
It could go either way. That's correct.
They could also have it going back. I'm happy here. There could be. There's
could be either way. Sure.
Yeah, but for everyone that breaks loose of their Jewish identity and just goes for it, there's 10, 20, 50 others who snap back. So the U-turn is a more common event, but it takes many years. So you see, do you feel that, well, we've already agreed, the gurus aren't aware of this process that we're talking about, this U-turn process, this mental duality that the person goes through. The gurus aren't familiar with it because they haven't done the Purva Paksha of Judaism. They're very naive, they don't even know the difference between Jew and a Christian, much less Christian, you know, Catholic and Protestant, this sort of thing that every Westerner is the same. And they don't realize that there's so many nuances, and even within Judaism, so many nuances. And they haven't taken the time to really understand all this. Do you feel that if they had, and if people like you were to go teach the guru and say, let me really tell you about Judaism, let me tell you 5 things this won't be accepted, 5 reasons it won't be accepted. This is what Judaism says. Here's how it disagrees. Here's this, that. In other words, if the teacher would sit back and get actually tutored by somebody who knows the Purva Paksha of the other side, do you think they would be better? Or do you think that they don't want to know? Some of them, I've tried.
Some probably don't want to know. I think, again, my experience is primarily with Swami Rama. And I see him as someone who has done that. His international conference had, you know, Christians and Jews and Sufis, and they were all interacting and teaching each other, as well as the people who pay to come.
But he represented what I would call a sanitized Hinduism. A Hinduism where
yes, for the West he does.
He had already censored it out, so you don't have to. So he goes to the Jews and the Christians and everybody, having already censored out what they won't like. Yeah, and so turned it into science and philosophy and metaphysics and health and all that, which everybody would like. And so he has removed the Hindu stuff, rather than saying, okay, now let's discuss about this idolatry business. What exactly is the problem? Rather than saying, I want to have a world conference on idolatry. He didn't have the courage to say, yeah, he could have. I would, if I were as famous and as powerful and had so much clout, I would declare a world conference on idolatry. And I would bring all the guys, the pagans and the polytheists and the monotheists, I would bring them and say, let's discuss idolatry. Come on. There has not been a single conference on idolatry. We talk about, we are so provocative, we are open, we can talk about all that, but there are these things that are forbidden territory. So a discussion on the very open discussion on idolatry is too much forbidden. So he didn't do that. So I would say he's colonized, because the British colonized Indians to self-censor what would be unacceptable to the Victorian. This is the Victorian ethics, the Victorian aesthetics. In the 1800s, Victorian aesthetics dominated the British study of India, and the Indians internalized this and started projecting a very abstract Advaita Vedanta, where everything is metaphysical, philosophical, oneness, unity, and it's so straight, it's so nice, so that the so-called weirdness of Tantra was filtered out. The agamas were not translated, they were not even touched, which are huge texts. So things that would be troublesome to the colonial rulers were left out. And so this colonized Indian intellectual elite got promoted by the British. They like these kind of ambassadors to go around representing Hinduism. You see, and so 100 years later comes Swami Rama, who now turns it one level further into science. So this is we have to if Indians have to decolonize, we have to bring back that which is uncomfortable to the other. If it is part of our culture, we got to put it on the table. This is why I really like it when I meet a Jewish person who wears his symbols, or a Sikh who wears a turban, or anybody who wears the symbols, because he's saying he's who I am. Why do I have to do it at home privately? What's wrong with it? I'm willing to talk to you about it. Willing to explain to you about it. So the same way the Hindus now gaining confidence are bringing back these symbols, are bringing back the Tantra, are bringing back the Agamas, and it's a very important thing to do. And I appreciate your facilitating this conversation, because I think this will provoke, and it should provoke, some more discussion.
Definitely.
On these kinds of things.
Lots of room for more discussion, absolutely.
In these issues. So you're going to help me to set up some more conversations with other people like you, other Jewish people like you.
I will look for them.
Yes, yes. Because, I saw you in the ashram, and I said, this is a very sincere person. You're reading all the books and all the Saundarya Lahiri reading, and you've been at it for 4 or 5 decades of your life, very, very sincerely. And I meet lots of people, and I like to talk to them. I like to understand from their point of view. And I wish the gurus would do the same, try to understand things from their point of view. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
Shalom and Namaste.
Namaste. It's very good. Thank you.